Hollywood stood still this week. The bright lights of Los Angeles seemed to dim as the world said goodbye to one of its most cherished legends, Diane Keaton. Known for her charm, eccentric wit, and fearless honesty, Diane was never just another actress. She was the heartbeat of an era, but even in her farewell, she managed to create one last unforgettable moment. At her funeral, Christopher Walken, her longtime friend and co-star, delivered a tribute so moving that it brought an entire room of Hollywood's finest to tears. This was not just a goodbye, it was a masterpiece of emotion. A final standing ovation for a woman who had shaped generations with laughter, grace, and truth. Diane Keaton was one of those rare souls who never acted for fame. She acted for art. From her groundbreaking role in Annie Hall to her later performances in Something's Gotta Give and The Family Stone, she built a career on authenticity. When news of her passing broke, the entertainment world went silent. Tributes began flooding in from actors, directors, and fans who grew up watching her redefine what it meant to be both strong and vulnerable on screen. Yet among the countless words of remembrance, one stood out: the heartfelt eulogy delivered by her dear friend Christopher Walken, a man whose quiet intensity has always mirrored Diane's own uniqueness. What he said that day became the defining moment of her farewell. Their friendship began decades ago, back in an era when Hollywood still felt intimate, when collaborations weren't just business, they were connections built on shared energy and creative trust. Diane Keaton and Christopher Walken met on a film set in the late 70s, where art collided with eccentric genius. From the very beginning, there was something magnetic about their dynamic. Diane was radiant and spontaneous, full of laughter and endless curiosity, while Walken carried that quiet intensity, the kind of energy that grounded every scene he stepped into. Together, they created a chemistry that felt effortless, an unspoken rhythm that extended far beyond the camera lens. Walken once said in an interview, "Working with Diane is like dancing with light itself." It was one of those rare statements that perfectly captured their bond: unpredictable, luminous, and beautifully human. They challenged each other artistically, pushed one another toward vulnerability, and found in each other what all great artists crave: someone who understands without needing to explain. Over the years, their friendship moved beyond scripts and set calls. They became lifelong confidants, often seen laughing during award shows, sharing quiet moments at industry events, or disappearing from the noise altogether to talk about life, aging, and art. They weren't just colleagues, they were creative soulmates, bound by time, respect, and the understanding that true artistry isn't about fame, it's about truth. Diane admired Christopher's discipline. He admired her fearlessness. They supported one another through the highs of stardom and the inevitable lows that come with it. When one of them worked, the other was watching, quietly proud. So when news of Diane Keaton's passing spread, the world knew that Walken's silence meant more than words. People waited, not for a statement, not for a tweet, but for that one moment when he would speak. Because if anyone could capture Diane's essence, it would be him. And when the day of her farewell finally came, when the lights dimmed and the crowd held its breath, everyone in that room, from directors to longtime co-stars, knew they were about to witness something unforgettable. Christopher Walken's words for his dearest friend: "It was a gray, cloud-streaked afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind of day when the sky seems to mourn, along with the people below." Inside the small chapel, the air was heavy with reverence and loss. A grand piano in the corner played a slow, delicate melody, each note echoing softly against the wooden walls, like whispers of memory. The pews were filled with faces the world had grown up watching: Meryl Streep, Al Pacino, Diane Lane, Woody Allen, Goldie Hawn, Warren Beatty, all gathered not as stars, but as friends saying goodbye to one of their own. The scent of white roses and sandalwood hung in the air, blending with the faint hum of the music. A large portrait of Diane stood at the altar, her trademark hat tilted slightly, her smile frozen in that effortless, quirky confidence that had charmed generations. Flickering candles surrounded the photograph, their small flames reflecting on the glass frame, like tiny souls bowing in tribute. You could feel the weight of history in that room. This wasn't just another Hollywood farewell. It was a gathering of hearts that had been shaped, inspired, and changed by Diane Keaton's spirit. Her laughter, that unmistakable, infectious laugh, seemed to echo in the silence, as if the walls themselves remembered her. Then the piano stopped. The silence was almost holy. Heads turned as Christopher Walken slowly rose from his seat near the front row. Dressed in a simple black suit, he looked older, quieter, but his presence carried a calm that filled the room. Each step toward the podium felt deliberate, heavy with the years of friendship he carried on his shoulders. The soft creak of the floorboards was the only sound as he approached. When he reached the microphone, he didn't speak right away. He rested his hand on the wooden edge of the podium, looked up at Diane's photo, and took a deep breath. The crowd waited. No cameras, no flashes, no murmurs, just stillness. Even the air seemed to pause. And in that suspended moment, before a single word was spoken, everyone in that chapel knew they were about to witness something rare. A love letter spoken aloud, from one artist to another, from one soul to a kindred spirit who had lit up the screen and their lives with her light. His voice cracked at first, soft and uncertain, as though he was afraid that speaking the words out loud would make the loss feel too real. He stood there for a moment, gripping the podium, his eyes fixed on the portrait of Diane, smiling down at him. When he finally began, his tone was not that of an actor performing for an audience, it was the voice of a man remembering his closest friend. Diane never played the part of Diane Keaton. He began quietly. She was Diane Keaton, real, wild, brave, and impossible to forget. A faint murmur of emotion swept through the room. Every word carried the weight of decades, years spent laughing between takes, sharing late-night conversations on set, comforting each other through heartbreak, and celebrating small victories that only fellow artists could understand. He talked about her laugh, that unmistakable, joyful sound that could fill a room. Her laughter was contagious, he said, a small smile touching his lips. If Diane laughed, the whole room laughed. She had that kind of power, not because she was famous, but because she was alive in every sense of the word. His voice faltered, but he pressed on, recalling her stubborn optimism and her endless curiosity about the world. She believed in people, he added softly, even when they didn't believe in themselves. Then, his tone shifted. He looked toward the crowd and said, "She once told me, Chris, if you're not scaring yourself, you're not doing it right." That was Diane. She didn't live safe, she lived truthfully. She made mistakes loudly, loved fiercely, and created without fear. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of grief. You could hear people stifling sobs, hands reaching for tissues. Even the most stoic faces, seasoned actors and producers who had seen it all, were visibly moved. Walken paused, his gaze distant, his words slowing as if each one was being pulled from a place deep inside him. "I learned from her," he said finally, voice trembling, "that kindness is louder than applause. That you don't need to win every scene, you just need to be honest in it." By the time he stepped back from the microphone, the room was completely still. No one clapped. No one moved. It wasn't a performance, it was a confession of love, loss, and gratitude. Every line, every pause, every trembling breath came straight from the soul. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. Even those who had come as admirers now felt like they had known her personally, as if Walken's words had given them a glimpse into her heart. When he finally returned to his seat, he didn't look up again at her portrait. He simply closed his eyes for a moment, as though replaying a lifetime of memories. The laughter, the work, the friendship. What he said wasn't scripted, it wasn't rehearsed. It was truth, raw, unguarded, and eternal. And in that moment, it became clear to everyone in the room that this wasn't just a eulogy, it was Diane Keaton's final scene, told through the voice of the one man who understood her best. Diane Keaton's legacy was more than the sum of her films, her awards, or her iconic fashion. It was her unwavering honesty, the kind that made audiences see themselves in her every role. Diane never chased trends. She was the trend. From the moment she appeared on screen, she rewrote the rules for what a leading lady could be. She didn't try to fit into Hollywood's idea of perfection, she built her own definition of beauty. One rooted in authenticity, warmth, and individuality. Her voice, her laugh, her awkward charm, everything about her reminded the world that imperfection is what makes us human. For decades, she embodied the kind of confidence that didn't scream for attention. It simply existed, quietly powerful. Whether she was portraying the vulnerable romantic in Annie Hall, the strong yet tender mother in The Family Stone, or the independent woman finding love later in life in Something's Gotta Give, Diane showed generations that aging isn't decline, it's discovery. Her presence became proof that femininity could be both fierce and funny, graceful and flawed, elegant and real. Her laughter became a kind of soundtrack for the silver screen, unpredictable, heartfelt, and alive. It filled theaters with warmth and left a lingering echo of joy long after the credits rolled. Her characters were never caricatures, they were reflections of real people, messy, emotional, imperfect, but deeply alive. That's why audiences connected with her. They didn't just watch Diane Keaton, they felt her. Even off-screen, her strength became a symbol of timeless grace. She lived unapologetically collecting hats instead of apologies, humor instead of heartbreak, and honesty instead of fame. She never tried to hide her quirks or conform to expectations, and in doing so, she became an icon not just of style, but of self-acceptance. Through every era of her career, Diane reminded Hollywood and the world that it's not youth that makes someone unforgettable, it's truth. She showed that beauty isn't perfection, it's presence. Her courage to be herself, her ability to laugh at life's chaos, and her refusal to let age define her became her greatest performances. And in the stories she left behind, her spirit continues to shine, bold, bright, and beautifully unafraid. As the final moments of the service arrived, time itself seemed to slow down. The air inside the chapel felt still, suspended in that fragile space between sorrow and gratitude. Then, from the corner near the piano, a quiet melody began to rise, the opening notes of As Time Goes By. The familiar song filled the room like a sigh, tender and timeless, its lyrics echoing the very essence of Diane Keaton's life: love, laughter, and the beauty of fleeting moments. People began to stand, one by one, their heads bowed. Some clasped hands, others simply stood in silence, lost in their memories. You could see the grief written across their faces, but also something softer, reverence. There were tears, yes, but there were also small smiles, the kind that come when you remember something precious. The soft glow of candlelight flickered against the polished pews, dancing gently across the walls, as though the room itself were breathing with them. Then, just as the last line of the song faded, sunlight broke through the gray sky outside. It streamed through the stained glass windows, splashing the chapel floor with warm gold, a single, perfect beam landing directly on Diane's portrait. For a moment, it felt as if nature itself had chosen to give her a curtain call. One last standing ovation for a life so full of light. Christopher Walken remained near her photograph, standing quietly as others began to leave their seats. His eyes lingered on her face in the portrait, that familiar smile that seemed to look right back at him. He didn't make a speech this time. He simply leaned in, almost as if whispering to an old friend, and said, "Good night, kid." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't grand, it was honest, exactly how Diane would have wanted it. A small, simple goodbye that carried the weight of decades of laughter, friendship, and art. And as he turned away, the piano began again, soft, slow, bittersweet. Outside, the sunlight stretched across the Hollywood hills, touching everything in gold. The wind carried with it the faint hum of the choir and the scent of roses. And for a brief moment, the city, the same city that had built Diane Keaton into an icon, seemed to pause, as if paying its respects. In that golden light, it felt as though Hollywood itself had taken a deep breath and smiled. Diane Keaton's story will never truly end, because her life was more than a collection of films. It was a reflection of what it means to live bravely, love deeply, and laugh freely. She didn't just act, she invited the world into her heart. One role, one smile, one unfiltered truth at a time. Her legacy isn't measured in awards or headlines, but in the countless moments she gave us: the laughter that filled living rooms, the tears that fell quietly in dark theaters, the lines that still echo in our minds long after the credits roll. She taught us that aging isn't something to fear, but something to embrace, a journey marked not by fading beauty, but by growing courage. She reminded us that it's okay to be imperfect, that real grace comes from honesty, and that it's never too late to rediscover yourself. Diane Keaton turned vulnerability into strength, humor into healing, and simplicity into timelessness. Christopher Walken's tribute did more than honor a friend, it crystallized the very essence of who she was. His words were not just farewell, they were a reminder that love, friendship, and art never die. They only evolve into memory, story, and legacy. Through his trembling voice, Diane's spirit was captured in its purest form, unfiltered, fearless, and impossibly alive. Even now, her laughter still lingers in every actress who dares to be different, in every audience that chooses authenticity over perfection. Her legacy isn't frozen in time, it lives, breathes, and continues to inspire. Diane Keaton didn't just leave behind films, she left behind feeling. She showed the world that love doesn't end, it transforms, that friendship can outlive fame, and that a life lived with truth and laughter will echo far beyond the final curtain. And thanks to Christopher Walken's stunning tribute, that love, that fire, has been immortalized forever. What about you? What's your favorite Diane Keaton moment? The one that still makes you smile, laugh, or maybe even tear up? Was it her sharp wit in Annie Hall? Her warmth in Something's Gotta Give? Or her quiet grace in The Family Stone? Share it in the comments below, and let's celebrate the woman who showed us that authenticity. will always outshine perfection. If this story touched you, if Diane Keaton's legacy still moves something inside you, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story that honors the people who made Hollywood human. Here, we don't just talk about fame, we talk about feeling. We remember the laughter behind the camera, the tears behind the scenes, and the friendships that outlast the spotlight, because these stories aren't just history, they're heartbeats. Join us as we continue to honor the stars who shaped our world with their art, their courage, and their light. Because some legacies don't fade, they glow forever.